he couldn't even hear that the mic was working. In the Catholic Church, those who are Catholics would know that when the priest stands up, the first thing that they say, the Lord be with you, and the people respond, and also with you. You know, that's how it goes. And so he tapped it and he mumbled something on the lines that I think there is a problem with this mic. And the congregation didn't clearly hear what he was saying. And they responded, and also with you. So I am tempted to get us started, even though we're just a few minutes before time, which is quite good for us because our reputation is not on those lines. We are not expected to start on time, let alone to start a few minutes before time as Africans. People expect that we are going to start after some few minutes. And for a change, we can just make the statement that we start just a few minutes before time. So that people don't go around generalizing that Africans never get it right where time is concerned. and we can just do it, even just for the statement that we are making. We are able to start even before time. Just some few minutes that we have. I think it's now just about 4 minutes that is we have. But let's get started, colleagues and friends. It is indeed a privilege to be here, to welcome you to this lecture. And so I would like to note the protocol that is here. Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, the DVC of the College of Humanities, Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of the College. We see you, sir, and note your presence. Professor Zondi, our guest speakers, Phamandla Zondi, Nondaba, welcome. Kakashe, siyathokoza kakhulu kuba nawe. Professor Hlongwa Unobuhle, who is here with us and is a panelist today. And we look at that with great excitement, Prof. Hlongwa, because you and Professor Mkhize, as this lecture is celebrating at least 20 years of being hosted in the university, I believe really you are one of the few people who've been there from the beginning. And so this is a milestone to celebrate with you here. And we also note my colleague, the Dean of the School of Education, Professor Von John, and Professor Muletsane, who is here, our chairperson of the John Dube Memorial Lecture, whom you are going to hear from soon. And then Mr. Langa Dube, who comes from the great grandson of Dr. John Langalbalele Dube, and who is the family's official spokesperson. I need to make that clear, together with his wife, Siyabonga kakhulu ukuba khona mama. We appreciate your presence. And we also have, for the first time in the history of the lecture, we've always had other members of the family from Dube. The Dube family, we today have Zweli Dube, who is the great-grandson of J.L. Dube, which means this tradition is going forward to the future. We really celebrate your presence, eh? And together with the colleague who is accompanying you. Zweli is the director of the J.L. Dube Foundation that has started and is actually making waves around. Very exciting to have you here. We are also having Professor Cherif Keita, who is with us virtually. And then we welcome him. He's also going to be on the panel. And then we have got the Ohlange students, the zebras, the young zebras. We welcome you. Welcome the zebras here tonight. Thank you so much. It's so good to have you, as always. And then after that, we also have Judge Tabani Jali, who is the head of the alumni, Ohlange alumni, he's coming with Ubaba Unglobo Fuze. We welcome you to this lecture. It's a privilege to have you again. It's for the first time that we've got the alumni being represented in this lecture. We celebrate that. And we also then have Professor Hari Masondo, who I must introduce now as our guest from very, very far away, from the University of Venda. Welcome you. Welcome you, Prof. It's good to have you, and the Masondo girls are somewhere in the crowd in here. And then we welcome also everyone of the staff, students, members of the Senate and Council who may be watching online, and our virtual audience that's participating. I tried to comfort our guest speaker tonight that he shouldn't be discouraged by looking at the audience and think that we are just limited and look for people who are not here. And then I then remembered that it helps to be a church person. You know, in the church, you are always told about the audience that is beyond. You don't worry about the ones that are before you. So you believe that there is a cloud of witnesses that's watching you. So can you try and have that spirit of belonging to the church and have a picture? Have a picture of the bigger audience, the cloud of witnesses that is there. We call it the virtual audience that's with us. And so we welcome you all, friends and colleagues. Really do feel at home and enjoy this day. It's a very, very remarkable lecture for us, as this lecture has now reached 20 years being hosted by the university consistently without fail. And so, as we understand, naturally, when an event happens for the first time, it's an event. Second time, it's an event. But for the fifth time, it graduates into an institution. So this is no longer an event, the J.L. Dube lecture. It is an institution within the institution of KwaZulu-Natal, University of KwaZulu-Natal. And so we're just part of that great institution and its tradition that we are celebrating. I would like to invite you to take this moment with us, including the audience that is virtual here in KwaZulu-Natal, as we are under the dark cloud, having lost umntwana wakwaPhindangene, Inkosi uMangosuthu Buthelezi, so that we can just take a minute to reflect and think and be with the family as they remember umntwana wakwaPhindangene. And we know very well, those of us who do history know how much he valued the work of J.L. Dube. Given an opportunity, he reflected on that with joy, excitement, and sometimes with a sense of nostalgia. When you listened at what he would be celebrating, he would be watching maybe at home with us, but he's not with us now. So can we stand up and just take a moment of silence to reflect, think about him and his family at this moment? Thank you. You may be seated. Just a notice, there are isiZulu headset for those who want translation. If you just raise your hand, our assistants will quickly give you an isiZulu headset. If you need one, please let us know. Let us know. And if you you need any form of assistance, that gentleman, can you stand up, Nkonzo? That handsome gentleman there will be happy to help you with anything that you may want assistance for. Let's get started then, friends, with the lecture. And the program is very clear and straightforward. We are not going to be wasting any time. You know, it's unlike those funerals where suddenly that uncle and aunt who was not even in good terms with the deceased comes and then whispers to the MC and requests just a few minutes to speak, and then they're included. And also waiting for that distant cousin comes from somewhere, also has a story, and we're not going to behave that way here. We're going to keep to the program as it is and follow it so that we are able to make progress. I would like to take this opportunity to then introduce to you our Deputy Vice Chancellor and the Principal of the College of Humanities, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, who himself actually comes from Inanda and has got very, he's passionate about the Dube story and Pixley Isaga Seme, all the people, Lamakati and all that. So he comes here and he's been part of this lecture from as far back as one can remember. So here you are not just being given somebody who's going to be doing it because he's got a sense of duty, but you've got somebody who is part of this tradition. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Ngiyazibongela kakhulu mphathi wohlelo umbulazi wena waweliza mbezi ngesikhali. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. Yeah. Program Director Professor Khumalo, members of Council, Senate, and the Executive, Mr. Langa Dube and Mrs. Tobeka Dube and the entire Dube family, our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Zondi Nondaba, Professor Von John, the Dean of the School of Education in an acting capacity, and the entire deanery who are present today, Professors Molosane, Khumalo, Hlongwa, Professor Keita, and Professor Paulo Zulu, the President of Ohlange Alumni, Judge Tabani Jali and his entire delegation, and all the alumni of Ohlange High School, all the learners from Ohlange High School, we recognize you in a special way because you are our future. Students of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and staff members of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and all community members who are with us here today, including those who are joining us virtually. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and distinguished colleagues, good afternoon or good evening now. I stand before you today filled with immense pride and gratitude as we gather for the 20th annual John Langalibalele Dube Memorial Lecture. This lecture holds a special place in our hearts as it is not only a testament to the University of KwaZulu-Natal's commitment to honoring the legacy of Dr. John Langalibalele Dube and Nokutela Dube, but it is also a flagship lecture of our College of Humanities. As we mark this significant milestone, it is imperative that we reflect on the journey we have undertaken over the past 2 decades. We have seen the John Langalibalele Dube Memorial Lecture evolve, grow, and touch the lives of many. It has not only celebrated the life of J.L. Dube, but has also become a catalyst for interdisciplinary collaboration, fostering research interests across a spectrum of academic disciplines, including education, politics, religion, gender studies, and the social sciences. I must also emphasize that when this lecture series commenced, there was not a single book dedicated to John Langalibalele Dube's life. However, over the years, we have witnessed the birth of publications such as First President by Heather Hughes, along with contributions from scholars like Simanga Kumalo and Asanda Sizani. Films like Ukukhumbula Unokutela by Cherif Keita and Amagama kaNokutela by Asanda Sizani have further amplified this legacy. Moreover, institutions dedicated to preserving the legacy of J.L. Dube have emerged, such as the J.L. Dube Institute and the J.L. Dube Foundation, representing a continuation of their invaluable contribution to society. Today, we are here to celebrate the theme, celebrating 150 years of Nokutela Dube. This theme invites us to reflect on the extraordinary journey of John and Nokutela Dube, individuals who lived through times of significant change and adversity. Their lives were marked by the complexities of navigating shifting sands in a colonial world, where the promise of modernity was often overshadowed by the harsh realities of imperialism. We are privileged to have Professor Siphamandla Zondi as our esteemed speaker for today's lecture. His extensive experience and expertise make him well-suited to address the intricate nuances of the Dube's lives in the context of changing times. Furthermore, it is heartening to acknowledge the presence of our respondents, Professor Cherif Keita, who is a professor of French and the Liberal Arts and the co-director of the Africana Studies Department at Carleton College, and Professor Nobuhle Hlongwa, the Dean and Head of the School of Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, who are part of our esteemed guests. Such commitment and dedication deserve our utmost appreciation. I also extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to the dedicated organizing committee of the John Langalibalele Dube Memorial Lecture, led by Professor Relebohile Molezane. Your tireless efforts, meticulous planning, and unwavering commitment have once again made this annual event a resounding success. Your passion for preserving the legacy of the Dubes and fostering intellectual engagement is truly commendable. Thank you for your hard work and dedication in ensuring that this lecture series continues to strive and inspires generations to come. As we gather here today, let us not only commemorate the past, but also look to the future. Let us consider ways to ensure the continued success and sustainability of this lecture series. I challenge each of us to open our doors to new voices and fresh perspectives, to actively involve those who wish to contribute to its organization and to develop sustainable strategies for its resource mobilization. In closing, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for being part of this significant event. Your presence here today reaffirms our shared commitment to preserving and celebrating the legacies of John Langalibalele Dube and Mama Nokutela Dube. I now invite you to join us in this illuminating journey as we delve into Treading in Shifting Sands, a portrait of John and Nokutela Dube. Let us engage in thought-provoking discourse and continue to draw inspiration from their remarkable lives. Thank you, and let the 20th John Langalibalele Dube Memorial Lecture commence. Ngiyabonga.
Now we're going to have Ongezwa coming forward to render an item. Soon after her, I will not stand up. Professor Moletsane will come forward just to give us the history of this lecture. She really said, don't panic because I said history. She said she's not gonna be long. And, and I trust her, I know that she's not. So she's gonna come forward to do that. And then soon after that, Professor Von John will come forward to talk about the women, the place of women in history. And then he will introduce our guest speaker. And then after that, the guest speaker will come forward. I will then come after that to introduce the next person. Thank you very much. So it's gonna flow the way we see it. Professor, oh, it's Ongezwa first, yes. Ongezwa akezwa ukuthi sekubizwa yena manje.
Don't tell Dube cannot the trumpet from then to now, from here to now. They tax the colonial settings and bother its delusions about us. Her efforts are a persistent song. Persistent song. Persistent song. Samoya, Nodzingawi go bukwala nango Kayisawo. Ohlange High School, with its architecture, an idea is a love song, a spiritual song that reminds us that we are loved and thought about in this moment. The love song of umthandazo nothando. We stand here, we are seated here, being the prayer of uthando, la mama, Noctela Dube. Scriptures and verses need to inscribe the prayers of our mama. Scriptures and verses need to inscribe and transcribe the prayers of our mama. a liturgy of freedom, dreams of our children. Uphuma kwelanga, nokushona kwelanga kwaziwa ngemithandazo yabo. Meditations that have birthed a discipline and faith that counters the inhumane. The embodiment of Uhlange High School, and students know the classrooms, the yards of that school, and I realized dreams, living dreams of umama notata uDube, Victor Ntoni, Khaya Muhlange, Judge Thabane Jali, amazep. Their crackling voices and laughter were heard amongst the school bag. Ixesha lifikile, ixesha lifikile, ixesha lifikile. To remember umama, to restore our dismembered souls. I have met her spirit in the walls of Uhlange High School at an Easter weekend camp at church. I now reclaim every memory of her spirit hovering at that night vigil at church. In today's rhetoric of Imzabalazo, we would have raised her with a slogan that she didn't die, she multiplied. 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 So here we seated in this education, grounded, that asihambi sodwa. This truth is a comforting, warm blanket in these turbulent times we found ourselves. She's our sarcophagus bird, propels us to soar, soar into the future as we remember her. With this poem, I'm searching for her songbooks. With this poem, I'm searching for her melodies. How her breath formed harmonies. And even when we can't breathe, screams are heard today. Ilanga newspaper that shone brightly, even in the dark times. Its dark ink cascading the white slopes of newspapers, claiming its blackness. It takes courage to dream when the sound of the gavel in court says Black people can't learn maths, Black people can't learn maths, Black people can't learn maths, Black people slaves. I'm searching for harmonies in Nkosi Sigelela. I'm searching for harmonies in Nkosi Sigelela. I'm tracing her blood and sweat on this land, the land owner she was, the land owner she was, the land owner she was. So I will wipe the land with the palms of my hands to know we are flesh and bones of her dreams is to be alive. To know that we are flesh and bones of her dreams is to just be alive. We will sing of her praises in the history books that have forgotten her. We will create modules of her music, her songs, her harmonies, her melodies. I hope the UKZN Music Library has a music archived in the books, in the shelves, in the walls. With this song, with this poem, we remember you, Mama. Endlessness on saxophone.
Mfundisi lied. It's a long history.
It's 20 years old.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, students of Uhlange, I'm going to greet you as special because you are very special. I'm not going to say protocols observed because you are very special. But I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Just a brief overview of why we are here today. So as part of its research and community engagement strategy, UKZN and its various entities focus on developing and disseminating knowledge through seminars and public lectures. And obviously the annual John Langalibalele Dube lecture is the College of Humanities' contribution to this project. So historically, this lecture has been hosted by the School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics on the then School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics on the on the Pietermaritzburg campus since 2003. With the establishment of the John Langalibalele Dube Chair in Rural Education, which I'm very honored to be currently holding, the School of Education and the now School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics have collaborated in organizing and alternating in hosting the lecture either on this campus, the Edgewood campus, or on the Pietermaritzburg campus since 2010. My colleagues and I are very fortunate to have the support of the leadership in the DVC, Professor Mkhize, and our two deans of school in the two schools. Most importantly, over the years, we have had the support of the Dube family, of course, and we are very grateful for that. To save time, because I was told to not go on for, I was warned to not go on for too long. I'll just give you a glimpse of the lectures we have had just during the COVID years that we have hosted. In 2019, for example, we hosted Professor Bongani Nxulunga, and the title of his lecture was Lessons of Struggle from the Pioneering Generation to the Fallist Movement. The students on campus will relate to that. And then in 2020, when we were right in the throes of COVID, we had Professor Nomalanga Mkhize, who cautioned us and titled her lecture, Locating the Umbilical Cord in Africa, Why the South African Decolonization Debate Must Resist the North and Latin American Trends. In 2021, we celebrated the 150 years of John Langalibalele Dube himself with a series of lectures that started from Monday and ended and culminated with the big lecture on Thursday. So on Monday, we had Professor Nceba Qaleni doing a webinar that focused on African traditional medicines and COVID-19 vaccines. And then on Tuesday, we had Mr. Mike Mwendani on land and climate change. And on Wednesday, we had Professor Heather Hughes and Deborah Mindri presenting a webinar titled Unsilencing Nokutela and Angelina Dube. And then the week culminated, of course, in the celebratory lecture by our own Professor Sharif Keita, who's today online, in a lecture titled Celebrating 150 Years of Dube. Last year, in 2022, we had another panel on indigenous languages and decoloniality in higher education, a conversation with Dube's work. The panelists were Dr. Thulani Mkhize, a senior lecturer in the Department of English here at UKZN, and her paper was titled The Vernacular Pasts and Their Present Power. The Case of 19th and early 20th century newspapers. Professor Langa Khumalo of Northwest University, African Languages in the Context of Fourth Industrial Revolution, a Decolonization Perspective, and Professor Nokhanyo Mzanga of Nelson Mandela University, with perspectives on the new language policy framework as responsive to students' access, success, and support in higher education. And our Mr. Kumbulani Mngadi was the respondent on that year. This year's lecture, of course, is presented by the amazing Professor Spamandla Zondi, who will be introduced shortly. The organizing committee that I want to thank before I sit down is made up of myself, Mr. Professor Sbusiso Masondo, Professor Mangaliso Khumalo, Mr. Kumbulani Mngadi, Ms. Xoliswa Zulu, Rakshika Sibran from Public Relations, Mr. Nkonzo Mkhize, who stood up just now. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the lecture, and our two deans and our DVC. Thank you very much for attending the lecture tonight. Thank you very much.
Program Director, DVC Professor Mkhize, our guest speaker, Professor Zondi, members of the Dube family, Langa and Tubeka Dube, Zweli Dube, Judge Jali, distinguished guests, staff and students of UKZN, good evening and a warm welcome. And I think I want to express a special welcome to the contingent of young learners who are here joining us today. We're glad to have you, and I hope you one day will return to UKZN as students. It is really wonderful to host all of you on the Edgewood campus for this JL Dube lecture this evening. Prof. Malitsane asked me to make some brief comments related to the place of women in history and the implications for history education. I want to broaden the latter part of that topic to talk about the implications, I think, for education in general. And I must start by declaring that I'm not a historian. My area of scholarship is peace and justice education. So I want to draw on this area of education to make a few points about what I would call the erasure or absence of women from history, indeed from much of scholarship. In June this year, on the Pietermaritzburg campus, UKZN hosted an international conference on the topic of non-violence. And our Professor Mkhize made the opening address, and I know Prof. Slonga was also with us at the conference. Given our context in this country and the global context of a world growing less peaceful and more unequal, this was an important event and generated some powerful insights and hopes and promises of action. I brought the program, and for those of you who are close enough, you will see that the deliberations on nonviolence were framed around the legacies of three global icons: Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. In fact, most people referred to the event as the Gandhi Mandela King Conference. In my presentation at the conference, I, like most speakers, engaged with the inspirations provided by these three well-known global icons of peace. But I ended my presentation by challenging the audience to consider why it is that most of the peace icons that we remember and celebrate are men. Where are the women? I teach a course, a master's course on peace education and conflict transformation, and I've been doing this for about 15 years now. When I invite my students to develop peace education lessons and I urge them to draw on the inspiration of a peace icon that they admire, very rarely is that icon a woman. Why is this the case? Why is this the case? Have women not contributed to peace in these ways? And this is despite 18 women having won the Nobel Peace Prize. We know that there are more than 90 men that have won it. So it's not just about, I think, the difference in numbers. It has to be about our patriarchal and very gendered ways of remembering and celebrating. And we need to find ways to dismantle this. All histories are constructions, and I think large parts of our histories need reconstruction. So it is for this reason that I'm delighted tonight that the organizers, and thank you, Prof. Malitsane and your team, of this year's lecture have chosen to recognize and celebrate 150 years of Nkosazana Dube. And I believe it is also significant that this lecture is taking place in a set of buildings that recognize other important women like Ellen Kuzwayo and Phyllis Naidu. Both of these acts are parts of the ways in which we can stop and reverse the erasure of women from history, and ways in which we can recognize their central roles in struggles for justice, peace building, and most importantly, their important humanizing roles in our families and communities. This is part of what decolonial scholars refer to as critical remembrance. We have a lot of work to do in this regard. And we should be getting our learners all the young people who are here today, to be constructing their own local histories by researching and writing about the women and the men in their families and communities, and recognize the wisdom and roles of these local icons. And I'll end by sharing that as I wrote this last night, I realized that this was also a challenge to me. I was raised by my grandmother, Kamachi Pillai, from the age of 2. And despite very little formal education, this wise matriarch taught me to read and to solve problems. But in all of my writing thus far, I too have neglected her history. And this is something I plan to correct. Thank you, colleagues, Ngiyabonga, and we look forward to continuing these reflections through the speakers that we have tonight.
Good evening. Earlier we were just talking and we were talking about inkonzo yamaphechana. Now we introduce inkonzo yamagadget. It is my privilege to introduce the son of the University of Durban-Westville, who graduated with a BA and higher diploma in education. I'm also honored to be here to acknowledge another daughter of University of Durban-Westville who will be part of the panel today. Now at Durban-Westville, Mnananga. Professor Siphamandla Zondi is a professor of politics and international relations at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Zondi also taught at the University of Pretoria. I don't know this thing about Onondaba. They like to lead. He has led wherever he has been. He has been leading. He's been leading. If you read the little blurb that we have next as an advert, you will see he has been leading. He was the executive director of Institute for Global Dialogue from 2009 to 2016. So he has just been leading, and he was inspired by great leaders, among them Dr. Miles Monroe. He previously headed the Institute, I've mentioned that. As part of his education, he did his master's and doctoral studies in African studies at the University of Cambridge in the UK. Professor Zondi has a lot of interests, and he's interested in international relations, especially that pertain to us in South Africa. So it would be very interesting to listen to him today speak and reflect on the legacy of Nogutela Dube, an amazing woman. Nondaba Gagashe, the stage is yours. Address us.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, in which you also added what was not written. A number of things we were looking at and like, no, but this one is not written in the profile that Nkonzo never asked me for. I'm like, what profile are they going to read? Because he's never asked me for a profile that does not make me the focus, but makes Ombuyazi, Omafuguzela, the focus. I will mix this Zulu and English if you don't mind. ngokukhulu ukuthobeka ngifuna ukuthoba kakhulu kuphela bona basembo. Historical abaklima ukuthi nabo bamakhosi. Angishongo ukuthi ngiyayiphika leyo nto. Ngithe baye bathi nabo bamakhosi abasembo. Umkhize, siyabonga kakhulu baba. We appreciate the work that is being done here. And the members of the leadership of this great university that I'm proud to be a product of, as a son of the soil, born in the southern part of Umvoti River, the river valleys of Umvoti, brought up there and found myself here. And that is where I learned Bani Chow. And then feasted on it for a long period of time. I also want to pay homage to the program director, Siyabonga kakhulu, and wena oyisimangaliso sasemantungweni bakubize kanjalo ngizothatha nje ngisho njalo. And then I want to thank the research chair who gave us a very short history instead of a long history I was expecting. And bambiza umletsane. And then as a researcher, I figured out that Mletsane has its roots in the word Muleche, which simply means the springs, the place of beginnings. Yes, and she probably does not know, but I've already found it. So she can take what I've just said. A speaker in a church, you say amen. Don't say other things, say amen only, which is, it is true what you are saying. And then I also want to really thank my sister that I went to university with. We all survived on pieces of dry, very old bread in order to make it to school, lived on the quiet for a long period of time. I know her as Umakwenza, Orandemande, but for some reason, so Kapisa. But I don't know. I don't want to cause conflict. I also want to pay homage to Professor Keita. We've seen the work that you have done. We are working on your steps, but we really appreciate it, what you've done. Allow me to also to greet Umakeba, my God, Koliswa, and also greet a poet that started us here. I was very moved by what the poet has done. And ngokukhulu ukukhetheka kakhulu ngicela ukubingelela ke umndeni walabo esingabo lapha umndeni wakoMbuyazi omafukuzela ngizwile ukuthi kukhona lo esikhuluma ngayo ulanga ekuthiwa libalele bese kuthiwa namhlanje kukhona omunye ulanga akushongo ukuthi lona lenzeni kodwa kuthiwa ulanga naye kodwa kwangachazwa ukuthi lenzeni. Kwasekuthiwa lo munye uthe izwe alincane izwe libazi sizwe kanjalo sinihlonipha kakhulu. We thank you so much for allowing us to even think and ruminate about these great ancestors of yours. Let me just remind you now, talking to the Dube family, an African proverb of the people called the Turkana people, who are found on the Lake Turkana between Kenya and South Sudan, have a saying which says, take care of earth, not because it was handed down to you by your ancestors, but because it was lent to you by your great-grandchildren. So it's not the past 150 years that places a burden on you to live up to a particular expectation, but it is those who will live 150 years from now. And that is what they have said to us. So remember that, remember that. A little rest, a lot of zest. Mind exhausted by exertion, body weighed down by walks of life. Things achieved, many remain to be achieved. The road traveled is fulfilling, yet its hills and descents took a toll on my body, on the soul. Many words exchanged, some of wisdom, some of hope, some even of exasperation, some of foolishness. Many words needed ahead, ones that build and mold, the sinews needed in order to stretch forth toward the future that we yearn for. Many lives impacted by purpose sometimes, but sometimes by chance. Negatively sometimes positively. Many things seen in a journey of life, many things need to be unseen because of that journey, much to receive because of the hopes we have. Had a lot in the passage of time, stuff to hold on to, loads of rubbish to dispose of. Time happened, it happened to us, happened to them, happened for us, happened through us, happened for us. Time froze also, but time stood still, and yet time raced fast and paced us to the next level of becoming. A little rest, therefore, I have. The little rest is a bit needed, and resting from effort, but never from purpose. Much zest is also needed, and much zest is to be had. Energy to tread firmer along the route that others before us have set. We need a lot of potential and energy to accomplish better than we have inherited for ourselves. So a little rest, a lot of zest is what we need. That's my poem inspired by the life of Mafukuzela and Mamdima. It just came to me this morning. So that is it. Now, it was not in the speech. When you talk about great people, their spirit comes upon you and it gives you the wisdom to understand them, not on the basis of what was written on the outside, which is the impression, but on the basis of what was working in them from their gut, which is expression. I'm going to repeat. When you think about great people, such as the one we're thinking about, there is a possibility we can understand them on a basis of what appears on the outside, whatever they allowed us to understand, whatever they said, whatever others observed of them, that is expression, sin from outside, expression, as in the word exit, expression, but there's a possibility of getting into their isibilini, into their gut, and understand them from the basis of their energy inside, and that is expression. The other one is impression, and that is what we chose this. What shall we say? I want to ask us today. What shall we say about Mamdima? What shall we say about Mamdima that the elders called Nokutel? What shall we say about Mafukuzela, Omnyama, that the elders call Langalibele? Today, in this particular moment, Mamdima was born of the Mdima clan, Oshange, Odumagudu, Omdima, Balaza, Makonga, Nojobo, Opanganda, Dangazo, Osbamba Lugepuga, Jengonyama. When so much strife around us dims out our hopes, what shall we say on the basis of her life? When so much around us is broken, when there is so much regress happening, when even the organization they founded seem not to care, seem not to understand, what shall we say when poverty, inequality, unemployment, despair, social anger, violence, crime, corruption, incompetence abound right around us, even in institutions that are greatly respected? Shall we agonize, perhaps? Shall we mourn, perhaps? Shall we wallow in difficulty, in pain, perhaps? Shall we join in sorrowful remembrance of who they were and what we have become, how the hope for which they existed and they built has dissipated? Shall we really wallow in anger? Sikhathazeke sidangale ngenxa yesimo asisibona manje esingafani nesimo ababesakhi. Shall we agonize or shall we organize? Shall we put our heads together and see if we might be inspired by what they hope for, which remains even to this day in abeyance, has not quite happened exactly as they hoped for. Shall we agonize or shall we organize? Shall we organize or shall we agonize? And I suggest that there are those two options, at least among many options that we face today. Many of us will look at what they did and look at the splendor of their works under much more difficult environment and conditions than we are today. And look at what Umamdima was able to achieve by the age of 44. It's amazing. And like, what happened that we are unable to live up to the same thing? I'm older now than Umamdima was when she died, but she has achieved a lot more than has achieved. What went again? What happened to me, born of the same group of people, that I'm unable to say that history will tell about me what I did for Indawo yakithi kwaMaphumulo, Indawo yakithi kwaHope, in the same way that they were able to do, not just for Indawo yakubo, but for the whole of society. What shall we say? Shall we cry to the spirit of the Dubes in complaint? Shall we get back to ourselves maybe and realize we have power to change the things for better in our lifetime, just as they did in their lifetime? Shall we lament? Shall we be lamenting souls bruised by disappointments of our time? Come with me. Let's take our souls out to face this travesty and travel back in history to time back then, when we had among us the upright, the strong, the dedicated, the committed leaders who wanted to change not just their personal lives, not just the lives of their relatives, but the lives of everybody. Many of them they did not even know, were never related to. Come with me, let's journey back to those activists who were driven only by public purpose, public good, and leaving people better than they found them. Come with me, perhaps we journey back to those who had a fire in their belly that caused them sleepless nights, made them sacrifice even their own family for the betterment of another. Come with me to those who did not utter the word umuntu ngabantu, but they lived it in their daily experiences. They are better than us because we are eloquent, but they were effective. They are better than us because we get good speeches, but they had good deeds. Perhaps we should go back and see if we might not rediscover our soul. Perhaps we've been dismembered in the manner that Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about it, that at an encounter with colonialism, when colonialism gives dignity to us, it dismembers us, for it separates our mind from our hearts. It separates our souls from our bodies. It separates our spirit from our being. It separates us from who we are. We become two souls cast in and tossed back and forth by the situations of life. Perhaps come with me. Let us wander with our minds, for we cannot move with our bodies back in time. And let us wander with our minds and our souls through the lives and times of Umamdima and Umafuguzela. Would you come with me? Let's go. I call it treading in shifting sands. Nyathele emhlabathini efudukayo. Nyathele emhlabathini enyakazayo njengeyolwane. Unyathele nayo iyahamba. Ihathele nayo iphuma kwi-direction yayo. I-direction yakho i-challengewa i-direction yomhlabathi esiwunyathelayo. They too had to contend with crosswinds, as Professor Mkhize said earlier on. They had to contend with the shifting times. They had to contend with terrible times. They had to contend with resistance. They had to contend with confusion. But they had learned to step forward in the midst of shifting sands. Perhaps their consciousness, perhaps their trueness of soul, perhaps their deep understanding of their duty as human beings, born of a man and a woman, help them know how to walk in shifting sands. Perhaps that which they had come to realize they needed to fight for had caused them to contradict the conditions of life. You and I, under ordinary circumstances, we are shifted by the circumstances of time. If we did not believe this, many of us are angry when somebody makes us angry. Many of us give up because some fool in politics made us give up on ever trying to change society. Many of us have dumped that party in order to go to this party. You and I are tossed by the wind, but they seemed to have this ability to stay steady in unsteady times. Come with me, let us look at this portrait. These are remarkable people of our history, and they are remarkable because remarkable people are those who read their times. I think for this generation who are in this period and becoming adults very soon, they will soon realize that if they are going to be successful in life, it's not going to be the degree they earn, but it's the degree of wisdom in what they earn. It's not going to be the diploma they have, but it's going to be the content and the purpose for which they earn what they earn. You understand what I'm saying? So these people understood the exigencies of their time, the difficulties of their time, the demands of their time, the difficulties of their time, the choices to be made of their time. They decided the best course of their action in the circumstances, against the circumstances, harnessing the circumstances, taking advantage of the circumstances, resisting the circumstances. But what makes them great is the fact that they took a decision in the midst of their circumstances, not our circumstances, but their circumstances. And that is why the lesson of history then becomes not to do what they did, but to learn from what they did, how to do what we must do. Ours will be different because our circumstances are different. We have a much more compatible situation. We have better facilities. Look where we are. This is our home. We have better opportunity. We struggle for much less. So we can't do what they did if we would just acquire the soul they had, which was the one which said, I may be born poor, but I am not useless. I may be born at the back end of an area, but I'm not useless. I am gifted in something that I need to discover and serve to society in my lifetime. Understanding that the journey of life is a journey of becoming, which is why we are called human being and not human being, because we have not been, we are yet to be. And the daily journey is me becoming better today than I was yesterday. I keep discovering myself, if I'm conscious of it, and how I could become greater on a daily basis. These remarkable people are marked not by the epic stories of beautiful, heroic stories of triumphs and victories without odds, but by the ambiguities, by the contradictions that come with standing in shifting sense. This is the complexity of living through the shadow of death, to use that biblical metaphor, that they live in circumstances that threaten their very existence, but they decide to live. They live in circumstances that are visual death, visual loss, visual nothingness, but they become something out of it. Almost like isibungu, which lives in that flesh, and it still continues to live through it, and it creates its own life. And from it, we get the manure. The most beautiful manure come from them. This is the complexity of living, crossing the line from being the outcast of society, those who are downtrodden, abalahliwe, who are not taken seriously, to becoming something, not on the basis of their background or their education or their status, but on the basis of what they did with the time they had and the small opportunities that they had. Even in this room, we have evidence of this in Phyllis Naidu, in Ellen Kuzwayo, and many others. They define the signs of nothingness. Amos talks about nothingness as our existence as Black people in the world, that you are nothing, and then you must end your being by becoming like another. For as long as you are not like another, you are nothing, because your existence is nothingness in itself. But they defied that because they lived as if there was something greater than themselves. This is about the mystery, I think, of leading. Sorry. This is about a mystery of leading boldly in times of fear, in times of oppression, often defining and redefining what it means to live through the time. I just want to make this third point. I know you need to count the points I'm making like a pastor who's preaching. The third point I'm making is that it is about who chose to make life out of the dead situations and sought to give meaning to times of meaningless pursuits. That is what their lives are. What do I mean by that? Mafukuzela and Mamtima, both of the Dube clan, lived through the times of sea changes in Southern Africa. This was the time of a colonial period in its deep and highest level. This was the period of consolidation, of oppression, the expansion of a civilizing mission that was meant to confuse people about who they are and where they're heading. This was a period of massive disruption of the political economy. There was a period when people were losing cattle, losing land. There was a kind of period when people were losing their ways of life, being forced into labor. There was a period in which the imperialist system in the world was engulfing every place with firesome passions. It is a period of expansion of the modern system with its message of hope, of salvation, of civilization, when at the same time it is delivering a misery, dislocation, and sadness. And this is a period when people are seeing a smiling face, but they are haunted by the stabs at the back produced by the same smiling face. So it's a period when the octopus has beautiful hands on the left and tormenting tentacles on the right, and causes people to be confused, which is what the state you are in now. A bit confused about where we're going. We don't know which way we are going. The Dubes were a prominent part of the mission-educated society that was part of the experience of change. These were educated people, early group of educated people who were educated in Christian missions, and therefore they were Christianized. And this was an elite of the time that was buffeted by the promise of modern life on the one hand, and the experience of barbarity under the modern system at the same time. So it is almost being pulled into hope and being punched back into despair by the same hand, or two hands of the same body. And we want to locate, therefore, the two in a generation that stood in shifting sands. Their thoughts, their actions express this sense of seeking to change the meaning of what it means to be on the margins of society. We have to understand, though, that because of that, there's a lot of ambiguities about them. A lot of criticism about them is failure to understand the ambiguities of their time. One of the worst things we could ever do in thinking general is to understand something that happened in 1950 on the basis of the circumstances of 2022. It's completely dishonest. It's completely foolishness in my view. It's completely misunderstanding of why it is. A lot of criticism about them and their relationship with the system and their relationship with the mission education system, mission education, with Christianity, with the church, with all sorts of things that fail to understand what the ambiguities of their time required of them. The relationship between time and space is very important for us to understand. We suggest in this lecture that there are lessons for us from these, because we too live in stormy times where hopes coexist with despair, where progress coexists with massive regress, where wealth coexists with abject poverty. There's something to learn from that. How do you continue to live in a shadow of death? This is so that we might answer the question, what do we read in the times and what do we do in the moment? Because I think it's an epochal question. What do you read in your time? What do you read? And what do you read? What do you do in the moment that you have? And because everybody can do. Now, Mafukuzela was a prominent historical figure, of course, in South Africa, as you know. And it was because of his contributions to education and the struggle for justice and inequality. He was a multifaceted personality with many dimensions to him. Many of them were yet to discover. For example, him as a poet. We have written nothing about him as a poet, but he did a lot of poetry. Him as a letter writer, a lot to be written about him about this. Him as a prophet, like a political prophecy, we haven't written a lot of. He was a multifaceted person who played various roles during his lifetime, almost always doing that simultaneously, leading to different interpretations about him. He certainly was the founder of Uhlanga Institute, as we know, the first African-owned and operated educational institution in South Africa. But this was a collaborative effort with many, including Umamtima. He set in motion a whole lot of public discussion. If you look at Ilanga newspaper, especially from about July of 1906, which is when Bambatha Rebellion happened in Piamakanda, and roughly to about 1939, you see that there's an attempt we led, Umafukuzela, in trying to define what did it mean to live as umuntu, as a human being, and expressing it in Zuluness, but not making Zuluness this unique thing that must be separated from being Ubuntu. Pretty much similar to how Makema Fuze writes about Abantu nalapho bavela khona in the 1850s, 1858, where he demonstrates for us that the people of this area did not regard themselves as Zulu until Theophilus Shepstein taught us to think of ourselves as that. But they thought themselves as Abantu Abantu Bagambuyas, Abantu Bagakupela, Abantu Baka, know that. So they understood their common fabric as human beings who have a bigger origin than Zuluness, which is just here. They understand their origin can stretch as far as 40 African countries. They're part of that bigger family, not some small little one that is defined by a man called Somfeu Kasonzika that we thought was an African when it was actually a British man. So he seeks to understand, what does it mean to express Zulu nationalism in a manner that is meaningful for all, including many who were not Zulu. How to use it to preserve the language and the meanings, the thoughts, the songs, the forms of identification that are meaningful to you. He understood that he says in one of his letters that a lot of what you have borrows from everyone, because he says Africans lived by borrowing, but the borrowing is not the English borrowing. It is actually lending to each other for mutual benefit. Ukusisa. Understand it? So he says, he talks about it, but equally so, Mamtima did even in more creative ways, the same thing, displaying how the love of one's indigenous system was at times the best way to survive the cruel imposition of the Western ways, including colonial rule, which is why the curriculum at Ohlange was designed by her and would always include her experience every time they traveled to the United States, went to the Transvaal at the time, went to the Cape, came back, modified the curriculum. Unlike us, you teach the same thing, you simply change the year of your study module. She went out and integrated new things in all of that. So Mafufuzela would champion the idea and Mamtima will implement the idea. So they knew how to do that. It's just us who are not able to see that complementary role in them. It is him who talks about Pan-Africanism long before Pan-Africanism is fashionable. Actually, he talks about it before the first Pan-African Congress of 1901 in 1898. He's part of a group that included the first African doctor who came from Adams, John Mavuma Nembula. They were part of a group including John Luthuli, the father to Albert Luthuli, including the Msana family, including the Mnini family, the one who is the father to the one who worked with Bishop Colenso. They sit in a group called Funa Malungelo. And Funa Malungelo was the first liberation organization established in the 1890s, early 1990s, 1890s. And they talk about Funa Malungelo, awonke umuntu omnyama, Pan-African thought. They understood they needed to relate it to everybody. Of course, you remember that Luthuli had also had relationships with people as far as Zimbabwe, as Zambia, as Mozambique, and all. So he had that perspective that there's something big that was in their hand. Of course, we know him for cultural preservation as well. He promoted the use of the Zulu language, was instrumental in establishing the Zulu Christian Industrial School, where students learned the Zulu culture and traditions alongside formal education. But in truth, there was much more than Zulu in all of that, if you come to look at it. Because again, when we say Zulu, within Zulu 2022, Zulu at the time is a mixture of so many things. Go and read any of Ilanga articles before 1946. It's not your Zulu. It's a mixture that borrows from every language all the way up to Kimberley. Borrow words from everywhere. So that is what they were doing. But the word they used for it was Zulu, but it was actually more Pan-African. We also know him for political leadership as one of the founding members of the South African National Native Congress. But we hardly ever realized that the idea behind the establishment in 1912 already exists in 1890 and 1891, 1892. The idea that there must be a gathering of everybody, oshisekelwe to Khulula Mntomnyama, long before. And he headed it for the first 5 years, of course, and therefore criticism about how they handled the whole thing, the idea that they were not radical enough. It's a very interesting one, because what is radical this year will be not radical in 10 years' time. Shall we say your effort today are weak because they don't match the circumstances of 10 years from now, a period we don't live in? Can we criticize you for not living in the time you did not live in? Of course, he and Mamtima championed women's rights and took very great interest in progress for women. So they insisted that both girls and boys would be admitted to their school, that they would benefit from community programs, including those that were done together with the help of the Black Americans. So they understood that whether male or female, the soul that needed help was a soul. Whether young or old, the soul that needed help was just a soul. So they would face scrutiny from the patriarchal perspectives of the time. They would face scrutiny from those at the time, including in the mission societies. You remember there was complaints in the London Mission Society about what was being done. They're not separating, but giving both of them what was called technical education. But you don't give women technical education, you must give them domestic education, as if domestic is not technical, but whatever it is. But there were complaints that they were not separating the two curriculum, and they simply forged on. They did that together. Of course, they contributed to journalism and publishing. Dube was a prolific writer, as you know. I don't know where he found his time to write, and it's time to think about all the things he did, given the many roles he had. But I suspect Mamtima whispered a lot of thoughts, like our wives usually do, so that we all appear intelligent when they have actually whispered for us. And Uzwileke Kupela, they whisper and we sound intelligent. We communicate on behalf of the family. And his work covered a lot of issues, covered race issues, covered issues of social justice, covered issues of economic justice, covered issues of politics, covered issues of ecological justice, the environment. Kwenziwani manje inkomo ziqoqwe endaweni eyodwa, utshani budleke buze buphele, bese kufika izikhukhula kugugule kunjani? He raises that question. It's a 2022 question, but he raises in what one was that? It was in 2013, 1913. He raises a question that is 110 years early. He raises it down. So it probes questions relating to knowledge, what we call epistemology today. How do you get to know? What knowledge is included, what is not included? He uses the newspaper pages really to just open up debate about everything, almost deliberately causing people to continue to talk all the time so that they don't focus on the tragedies of their time, so that they don't get to despair and give up on hoping. And almost from an issue, it creates another issue, almost create another issue, because when people talk, they have a possibility of being creative about what they would do. But if they stop talking, they're likely to fight or likely to die alive. So he seemed to understand that he needed to keep people alive until the time that was coming, the time of liberation. And then the last part about him I want to raise is about what has been called ambiguities of dependence. Schuyler Marx talks about a 19th century and late 19th century, early 20th century society in which Black people, Black communities sought to exist in spite of the efforts of this colonial system to wipe them away. If they would not resist successfully, they will collaborate to survive. And then if we look at it today, we're like, oh, collaborators. Anyone who has played umlabalaba, you know umlabalaba, African chairs, knows that there is time to move your pawns forward. But there's time where it is foolishness to simply keep moving forward. sometimes you must move it back. Inqama mayihlehla ayibaleki ayihluli iyolanda amandla. So changing strategy is not about heroism or cowardice. It is about changing strategy to read the times. Because where I come from, a person who simply just close their eyes and simplify, they are likely to waste their energy fighting the air because they didn't look too far. So the power of their punches is meaningless if what they are punching is the air. Sheikh Anta Diop, in that book, Barbarism or Civilization, he says, part of the challenge facing us as we resist colonialism is that we are like a strong man with a very sharp sword, the best of sword, slicing at the air with the best of our strength. Using strength is good, and finding the sharpest sword is good, but slicing at air is no heroism. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, you'll understand it later. There are people who won't understand when you decide not to slice at the air. Decide to hold back. Oh, coward. Because some people expect to simply fight to death, where there's no glory in dying in battle. The glory is in surviving. Usindaba amakwala, abakakwala. Yeah. So they had faced difficult choices when dealing with the colonial authority. Often found themselves straddling, often found themselves resisting when it was necessary, and often found themselves negotiating with the system. And there are some who analyze that period and do not want to give negotiation credit as an option. Yet the colonial system was ended via negotiation. So why should Dube not negotiate at the time in the interest of the people of next to Kwatuguza, whose sugar cane that had just started was about to be wiped off? Why shouldn't he go there and say, can't we give you a couple of cows so that we can keep the sugar cane? Because his purpose is to preserve these people's livelihood, even if they lose a few cows. He is calculated to keep this and lose this is better than to lose everything. Why is that not wisdom? Why should it be heroism that he fought until he lost everything? Then what? Ukulahlekelwa akukaze kwaba ubukhawa. Being in and out of the system, they had to join the system to see if we can fight it from inside and come out of the system to see if a good boxer, we know, is the one who can fight and jab and run and dart away, but is one who also can go in and test and go out. A foolish one is the one when they know they are overpowered, who continue to fight from inside so that they get finished. So that they can get a record of being the first one to be TKO'd. They are criticized for going in, even if they use that to fight for black rights. They are criticized for liberal idea of using education as a weapon to advance people instead of an armed struggle. Even that was a tactic for the same purpose as the armed struggle. Even if that produced the leaders that will advance the struggle forward. They are criticized for making links with the system and traveling the world and looking around. It's called collaboration. Even if they went there to raise funds in order to build schools for black people, the colonial system would not provide for. What nonsense are we saying? But Mamtim, very existence, an assertion of her own agency was very liberating for many people. We have a lot of evidence for this about many who followed in her footsteps because of what she was able to do. I know of a Nembula sister, who's one of the descendants of the Nembula family, who was inspired by her. So she went to go to take opera as their music choice, and would end up in the United States to do that. You know, Kaluza, Ruben Kaluza, all were inspired by them because they were able to do that. For I want to say, Mafukuzela's penetration of the system made certain things possible and inspired even more radical stances, even after that. He enabled the radical because of what he was able to do to penetrate the system. By sweet talking, ukushela isystem, kwamsi, because ukushela is to tell a lie in a nice way. He was able to touch the system, angeneguyo. Well, I've just disturbed some of those boys. It's to tell a lie, man. You know, in a span of oxen in a plowing field, the front oxen might need to do certain things, even compromise certain elements of the span to make it possible for the middle span and the back span to do what they need to do with less strife and with less stress. Any who's ever used an oxen to plant, you put certain type of oxen in the front, usually the ones that can take difficult. And then you put at the back, the ones that can steady the plow. You can't say one is weaker than the other, for one can't be without the other. There is no radical Mandela without the generation of Dube. There is no radical AW champion without the Dube. There's no radical Souls Msane Umaimai without the generation of Abu Dube. So sometimes, therefore, we misunderstand how they read their time. The ambiguities and the contradictions that Shula Marx talks about are realities they had to confront. They could not remake it, change it, but they had to live with it and confront it. They were not simply passive victims of colonial domination or simply collaborators, but they engaged in strategies to resist and negotiate and resist all the time. The purpose was the same, to liberate. Now, when we turn, as we move towards the close, to Mamtima, she has been reaching out of her story, not by how Mafukuzela worked with her, not by how Mafukuzela saw her, not by how Mafukuzela wanted it to be, but by patriarchal traditions of storytelling that told the story after they died. It is not a reflection of the life at the time, for she had free reign to do many things, led a lot of things, worked as partner to Mafukuzela. It is us who read later. We read like a gossiper. You know those guys who were bought Patatafi's shoes at a young age? Those of us, this generation won't know. Patatafi's shoes, because they were tough shoes, so they would buy them for you, and they would make sure they're a little bigger for your size to walk to school, because they take long to wear out. So they have to make it bigger because you were growing. So you would grow and your feet will grow. They'll start to pinch. You got what I'm saying? They still are not wearing out. So what happens is that you end up limping. And what happens is that they then end up wearing out, and then you get new shoes, but the limping doesn't stop. And then in Zulu say, we are bumper. Style like what you know for a long time. And it does happen. So storytelling has to do with the perspective. The perspective we do. So the limping guy will change the story and say it's style. When actually it was the pinching shoes. And they would think it is style. No, it is a bigger size of a trouser. It's not a step. So depending on where you see it, you can tell a story in two different ways. She is made meek and weak by the power of the pen that wrote. She is made passive and uninterested in broader society by the eye that observed and spoke, by the mouth that spoke her story. I like to remind us that she was born in 1873, and then she is reaching out as the first wife of Reverend John Langalibalele Dube. Secondly, I want to remind you that from about 1894, they start out to raise funds in the period when it was very uncommon. Go out to raise funds. They cannot raise it in South Africa. By the way, they started in South Africa. They went to the United States as well. And the aim was achieved about 6 years later, which is good. Because some of us are academics here. Mkhize expects us to raise funds, but it's been 10 years, we haven't raised 100 rand. And then I cover that. Hey, Kunzima man, I'm a professor. Yes. They were able to raise in 6 years enough to build Oshan. They were able to build that in the period when they were actually colonized people. How do you do that? How do you explain that you have a government right now of free people with aeroplanes, with everything, are not able to raise enough funds to build a school? And they raise it in times of difficulty. Abantu abanjani labo? If you read that in terms, that was a massive achievement, because it's equivalent to building a university, building Uhlanga at the time. They built a private university. To this day, we have no Black person who has built a private university in free times. If we understood, I know I'm controversial now. If we understood, I'm saying this because I'm about to finish and walk away. They won't be able to beat me. If we understood, Ostange should have been upgraded to a university in 1994, even if it was a single course university, for simply to finish an idea that started, was constrained by the circumstances of the time. It's okay to maintain the one that was built by Van der Merwe, but it's even more significant to maintain the one that was built by Tuskegee. Is a university now in the United States. Yes. It's the same idea, but different mindsets. You see, he established from that fundraising, does two things, because remember in 1900, it's the Osanga. 3 years later, they've raised enough to establish a newspaper. The story at the time says, to establish a newspaper, you needed funds equal to establishing 20 general dealer shops. That's what amount you needed, equivalent of like 20 malls. That's how much you're able to do. And that is why the newspaper survives for such a long time. And then other pioneering initiatives that you know. Her many talents were crucial in the groundbreaking Black educational work that happened and producing future Black scholars, future Black leaders, such as Albert Mvumi Luchuli, that she taught in 1914. She really taught. Mamtima was educated at Inanda Seminary herself, which is itself a pinnacle of training for future leaders. Not by default, but because students who got there were not always the sharpest student, but they were the wisest student, in the sense that they were there with a drive to make a difference. They were kind of young people who had a duty towards society, and she was among them. And no wonder she comes out and becomes part of the creation of the next thing, which was Uhlanga. But mina ngikazwa ukuthi thina sonke siphuma endaweni eziproduce abantu abenza into ezinkulu. kodwa thina sangase siproducer ezethu. Hey, a whole professor. Ngiyababona laba abanye. Lokho ke professor. Nasemngcwabeni uyabemeza kuthiwa hlala phambili, kodwa lutho nje. But abamncane a whole professor. She was also a talented singer, ladies and gentlemen, and she played piano and auto harp, and she was well regarded, even in Boston, where she played, and she was praised by the best players of the time. That could only come not just by talent, by the fact that she did everything from the gut. You won't understand me. There are talented people and there are gifted people. Gifted people do whatever they do from the gut. Talented people get everything from memory. All right, that's fine. It's okay. She became an accomplished singer and produced several accomplished singers, some of them in the United States, by the way, and some in South Africa, including Ruben Kaluza, who himself produced over 20 big opera singers and choir and composers and produced books of song. She was a highly skilled seamstress. The story is, there is part of the reason why Mafukuzela was so well dressed. She made the dresses. She made the best fashion of the time. If you look at Mafukuzela, this is market. This was serious high star. She was able to do that, and by the way, did it for students and at her school. No young person coming from a poor or a rich family would go without the school dress in Osanga. Why? She had put together a team, including senior students who were doing clothes. We don't tell that story because it looks like making clothes is a small thing. That's fine. But making clothes is what we call in big term industry, textile industry. She became a voice for Africa as well. Remember the remarkable thing said by journalists that when she sang in the United States, she mesmerized a lot of people with her voice. But they noticed that there was always a message about her people in her song. So there was a people in her song. And if you are not careful and you misread her story, you look at her song and you miss the message in her song. And yet she was singing to people who are moved by song and who are enlightened by song, who are changed by song, who are provoked by song, who are shifted by song. There are a lot more we can say in a song than we can say in speech. And as literary scholars tell you, works of art give you a license to say in that piece what you would never say in a speech, which is why praise poems would criticize Nkosi Senza ngakhona. Ithi mawubheka unyawo akanandawo yokusola. Mawubheka isinqe akanandawo yokusola. Mawubheka ihlombe trying to say ayikho into esingayikhuluma ngayo, fanele sikhulume ngokuthi ubukeka kanjani. But it's talking to a king. He's criticizing a king about it. Ayikho into ngizothini uwenze ini. So vele ngibona ngikhulume ngawo, ngiyathanda ibhantshi lakho, ngiyathanda yini. That's true. She received, okay, let me just say, she was a co-author of Amagama Abantu. Do you notice that? And in English, we translate it to, what do we call it? The Zulu songbook. What do they call it? Amagama Abantu. Ubani ofaka uZulu? Abantu baka Theophilus Shepstone, who did not want these people to see themselves as part of a civilization, but must only see themselves as part of a tribe. That is why Makemafuza's book too, he says, Abantu nalapho bavela khona. Then they translate to AmaZulu nalapho vela. Hayi bo. They are not misunderstood, but they are deliberately constrained. It's not a mistake. It's a deliberate constraint. Because if Mbuyazi, Uzoti, when you move from the basis that you believe you are a king in your own right, you believe you are strong in your own right, the best thing for me is to do, just that, it's enough. God. But ungumZulu nje waseNanda. eNanda phethu. The meta capital of South Africa. There, I am not simply debating, I am fighting with a vision, including your self-identity in the whole thing. Let me press on. She promoted Inkosi Sikelel' Africa throughout the world and gave it a dignity and made it a central part of the African struggle for dignity. She was a big supporter for educating women, very big advocate for women empowerment, encouraged education of girls, often took care of them very directly, fought for their interests, included their issues in their curriculum. She inspired also further confident African women to come after her by sheer example of her work before them, but also by her direct mentoring. I'm thinking here about Lillian Shabalala of Groudville, who later founded the Daughters of Africa and became a missionary in West Africa, who credits her for her own exploits. Yet the writers of history did not see that by mistake, they say. About a mistake in October. And until her death in 1917 at a tender age of 44, tender age indeed, she traveled many times with Mafuguzela to seek support, to seek backing, not just financial support for their project, but financial support for the purpose of their project. The project is a school. The purpose is liberation. The project is an industrial project, but the purpose is liberation. The project is a mission, creating a mission in Encwadi, Emakatini, through the Inkosi Makati. That's the project, but the purpose is liberation. So sometimes we need to read it through the project to discover the purpose. Then we understand the significance of what is being done. You understand what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. Yeah. When they established then an African community, they've established a school. I said we have not established any, which is the university. They have a school, which is the industrial school. They've added an institute, which is the university. They established both. Then they go on to establish a whole community. That's a whole community, buy land through the assistance of Inkosi Mkawe, of Amakati. They buy a whole piece of land where each community contributes a cow. They ended up with 300 cows in order to buy the piece of land, because they had to realize in order to have the peace of life, they may need a land for peace. Just realize that you may need to create, in order to create a community that you like, you can't create it in somebody else's land, in a native commissioner's land, in a colonial land. You may have to buy your own land and create a community. What kind of a people in that time and period decide they're gonna create a gated community? At that time, what kind of people are these? They decide that inspired John, later on to do the same thing. That inspired Amazamti Edendale to create Edendale. That inspired Amazamti Lady Smith to create Driefontein there. So you ended up with places created by Black elite where they bought land on freehold and they have full ownership of the land. as a community, so that they will then select one of them as a chief, with a leader who's elected, in order to create. What are they doing? They are trying to, in order to live out of the society, is to create a new community where they will then implement the ideals of freedom, progress, and civilization as they saw it. So all the households could benefit. A people who were rejected by society, downtrodden everywhere, now could say they own land in the midst of colonialism. What kind of a people think in this term? When we have governments even to this day, where people do not own the land, they own an RDP. Same. RDP. Now some come say RDP. But come with me, think about it. Umuntu onjani, what decide that I will create, I'll buy land next to Verulam. Land ebonke abantu asame sohlala khona lapha. But now this land, we're not just residing on a land owned by someone else. We are residing on land that we own. So should we need equipment, we can use it to get money. You own, which means you can create it. Because remember, Inwati then start to have schools of their own. Remember, Inwati also had agricultural project, had food gardens and all that. They became self-sufficient. So I suggest, therefore, the idea of acquisition of land was an attempt to undo the losses suffered in those 11 frontier wars, where people lost not the land, but what the land gives to you, also the possibilities and chances. I suggest that this was a redemptive project. It was an attempt to give people what they had lost that was deeper than the physical land. And therefore the land was a symbolism of landing on an upper pedestal than the one the system was forcing you to. Because some people must land somewhere. It was used for preaching, for public mobilization, it was used for community projects, it was used for all manner of things. Now in closing, though she produced many successful prodigies by her talent, many are focusing on the fact that she did not bear a biological child. How unfair. She produced many kids all over the world by virtue of her mentorship, but many are just thinking about the fact that she did not give birth physically to a child. She didn't worry about it herself. Actually, she saw it as an opportunity to go grow the community. How do you say to someone who builds a community, akekho adequate ngoba akakwazanga ukwakha umntwana oyedwa? Yasola futhi lantu abakhuluma le ndaba kaKhumalo. So, but it is part of it. Mamdima would move from the eastern, would move from here in KZN, go to Eastern Transvaal in Bekkerstrom, to continue to build there and leave a legacy there. Why can we undermine all of that? Let me close. She passed away in Johannesburg. She lived, made her difference in KwaZulu-Natal today, in the Durban area then. She died seeking medical help and would be buried in the Brixton Cemetery, where many great leaders will end up being buried. And at the funeral, the big who is who of the time confirmed her significance by turning up. People who turn up at your event confirm for us what your status is. Should it be that people doubted you? They are not invited by you, they came on their own. So the Priksliga Seme is there. Solum Sane Mai was there. Daniel Lintaka is there. The many of the big leaders of the time are there because they must have been recognized how significant it is. Dr. Miles Monroe says, it is not that we don't judge your significance in life by your duration in life, how long you lived, but by your donation in life. what you contributed in the short time you had. Because there are some people who lived a very long time with very little donation, and some people who lived up to the age of 12 and they already have a big donation. And that's what it means. What shall we say then in closing? Until Rebbe tells his story, the story of the hunt would place the hunting dog at the center. Indeed, history remains his story, and she is just an appendage, though never was like that in reality. Namtima is a reminder to us that we make out our story of life regardless of any limitation, but we may be subjected by the limitations of those who tell our stories after we are gone. We have the agency to change society no matter what our background is. The social role of elite in society is to build communities using advantages they have, not to simply acquire advantages for themselves. It is in our hands to build a society where we have little to complain about and a lot to compliment for. Leaders make themselves when they respond to duty imposed on them by what they see around them. Bavuke, bazenzele. However long a log of wood, says an African proverb, stays submerged under dark waters, it just does not become a crocodile. It may look like a crocodile. It may have seemed like a crocodile. It may be rough like a crocodile. Even gossipers might have gone and said, there is a crocodile there. However long it stays there, it will still not become a crocodile. Now, I don't need to interpret that. Mamtima, like Mafuguzela, taught us that it is possible to change our world with small little steps. A proverb of the Atete people of Mozambique says, that big baobab tree, that's the biggest tree, baobab tree, fell not because of the prancing monkey that was set on top when it fell, but it fell because of the work of small insects gnawing at its roots, slowly but slowly. But the monkey gets the credit. But the work was done by the insects. Can we be like those insects too? I hope we will pick up the mantle and march forward and end the crisis we live in under today. This crisis that surrounds us, including load shedding, Asugumesake, let us rise to the occasion and make a difference right now. Let us be our own Mamtima and Mafuguzela. Let us take care of Earth, not because it was handed down to us by the Dubes that we speak about, our ancestors, but because it was lent to us by our great-grandchildren. Asante sana siyabonga.
It is actually surprising that you can host a lecture for 20 years and you still have a lot that is new to learn about the same person. And it's amazing, it's unbelievable. I really do not want to spoil this, but actually, I was hoping that you would say the person who inspires you is Cornel West, rather than Miles Monroe. Of course, it feels like Cornel West, but thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. Let's give him another hand of applause. Now, after women have been praised so much, Professor Shlongwa, I know she's not going to disappoint by taking time. She's going to take women even in another level of keeping time. She addresses us now. And after her, we are going to have, we'll run straight to Professor Keita. I will not come here, I'll only come here when I have to do the question and answer. Thank you very much, Prof. Welcome.
Angithathe leli thuba ke ngibingelele ngokukhulu ukuzithoba angiqale nje ngokubingelela our DVC and head of Humanities College uSolwazi Unhlanhla Mkhize Ngibingelele kusolwazi urelebohile. Ngithanda ukulibiza kahle legama lonke ligcwale. Moletsane. Who holds the chair esihlangene ngayo namhlanje? Siyabonga kakhulu Prof. Professor Zondi Nondaba. Hey, siyabonga. Siyabonga kakhulu. Professor Raymond Khumalo, who is our Dean and the Head of School of RPC, Professor Vaughan, our Acting Dean in the School of Education, Professor Sbusiso Masondo, and the professor sitting next to you all the way from the University of Venda, Prof. Masondo, I acknowledge you, my sister. I would like also to acknowledge our Honorable Judge, Ujali, and Honorable Judge, Uteme Figa Washtene, Uhamba Noma Poloba, Ubabungobo. I acknowledge you, Babungobo. And I would also like to acknowledge Ngokulu Futuk Tobega, Umdeno Dube, Ubaba Ulanga, ehambisana nomama uThobeka Dube. Sithe masihlala lapha phansi ngacela ukulithola igama lika mama uDube ukuthi igama lakhe ungubani. Ngikwenze lokho ngamabomu ngoba angifuni kwenzeke amaphutha ayenzeke phambilini la women have been erased. Sangabazi bawobani bebe bekhona bebe bephila. Ingakho ke mama uThobeka sikujabulela kakhulu ukuthi sibe nawe namhlanje. Ngiyacela ndisimuphe nje ihlombe umama uThobeka Dube. Ehamba nobaba uLanga uDube. Angazi noma ugcine efikile yini uprincipal wohlange. Uma ekhona siya naye. I do acknowledge him. Awu ama-zebras bakithi. Niyabona kodwa mahle kanjani? Ama-zebras. Siyajabula kakhulu bantabethu ukuthi sinibone. Niqhamuka esikoleni esinomlando omuhle kangaka. Esinabantu abahambe phambili. Basebenza ukuthi anibe khona namhlanje. Siyabonga kakhulu ubukhona benu namhlanje. Koza kwethu bonke from the different universities who are here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, ngibingelele kunina nonke. Nondaba. How do I respond to such a lecture? Where do I start? So Prof. Moletsane is saying, let me not respond at all. Let me just go and sit down. But maybe to do justice to what Nondaba has done, maybe I will just try and maybe pay a little tribute, maybe to Umama Unoktela, Umamdima. In responding again to this excellent lecture, Nondaba, as we are celebrating 150 years of Unoktela Mdima Dube, I would like to begin by declaring that we are all daughters and sons of Unoktela Mdima Dube. All of us as we are here. Give yourself a big round of applause. So where you ended, Nondaba, where you were talking about Umama Unoktela Dube, that she did not have children of her own, actually she has us. Even though it's been 106 years for her existence, I know we're celebrating 150, but since her death, 106 years, here we are. We are her daughters. We are the sons, all of us as we are here. All the girls she taught at Inanda Seminary were her children. Sizwile ukuthi wayebathungela ngisho ingubo. All of them were her children. Ngithanda kancane ukuyandela kancane lapha eBhayibhelini ngoba sino reverend la ngaphakathi. We have about 3 or 4 that I saw, including our very own program director. Lapha eBhayibhelini kunesizwe okuthiwa esakwa-Israel. Laphaya umuntu wesifazane wayengabi ilunga liphelele lomndeni noma eshadile engakamzali umntwana wesilisa. Engakayizali njengane yesilisa wengapheleli kulowo mndeni. Okuyinto ehlukile kuthina njengoba samaZulu. Uma usuke usuthele ngenyongo usuke sewuphelelisiwe kulowo mndeni oganele kuona noma wendele kuwo. Khona futhi eBhayibhelini ngoba siyahamba siye esontweni njalo ngamasonto. Kukhona owesifazane igama lakhe okwakuthiwa uNaomi. Niyamkhumbula? NgesiZulu ke igama uNaomi ngingaluhumusha ngithi uNonjabulo. Emva kokushona komyeni wakhe namadodana akhe amabili, isimo kuyena sashintsha. Washintsha igama lakhe wazibiza ngoMara. uMara ke ochaza something bitter, yabona nje into engasanambithiseki. Lokhu ke kwakwenziwa isimo ayesekusona ngaleso sikhathi. Uthena akasenamyeni, akasenabantwana abesilisa, okusho ukuthi usewumtshingo ubethwa ubani. Usewumtshingo ubethwa ngubani. So during the time of Judges, the status of women were determined by being linked to a man. Women could not own property or land if they were not linked to either the father, the husband, or the son. So this is just an example of women oppression that we see eBhayibhelini, okuyincwadi engcwele esiphila ngayo, but oppression starts there. And not only does the Bible perpetuate gender stereotypes, it also perpetuates inequality and patriarchy. Unondaba did chat on the issue of patriarchy. So as a way of paying tribute to Mama Unoktela Umdima Dube, a woman who was a teacher, we are here gathered in the School of Education. Umama Unoktela Umdima Dube was a music composer, an essayist, a newspaper co-founder, and Ohlange Institute co-founder in 1900 together with Umafuguzela. I got to learn more about Umama Unoktela Mdima when I met Prof. Sheriff Keita. I'm happy he's online. He visited us at UKZN around 2016, 2017. And during that visit, he gave me copies, several copies of the film, Remembering Unoktela, Ukukumbula Unoktela. And I remember giving Mbuso Khoza a copy of that film because Mbuso is one of our greatest songwriters we have hosted at UKZN as an artist in residence. Umama Unoktela Dube sizwile ngencwadi ayibhala ethi amagama abantu, and simzwile uSolwazi uZondi ethinta udaba lokuthi ithema esihunyusha seyisesingesi sekuthiwa a Zulu songbook. Sizoshiya nje question mark ngenxa yesikhathi. Kodwa ke leyo ncwadi leyo yayina 31 compositions. And that book is very, very crucial because like it was the foundation of the Zulu choral music. The foundation. And ke uMama Dube sizwile ukuthi ekuhambeni amazwe behamba bemali eMelika noMafukuzela. She carried the composition of Enoch Sontonga Nkosi Sikelel Africa to the world stages, letting them know about the plight of the indigenous people of South Africa. And in doing so, Nkosi Sikelel Africa became the Pan-African Liberation Anthem and was later adopted by five countries in Africa. So that includes Zambia, Tanzania, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And together with UKZN, when we visited Tanzania, they sang this national anthem in Swahili. You felt at home, that I was at home in Tanzania. You felt like you were in South Africa because of what we were sharing, this Pan-Africanism that we felt when we were there. So Umama ke uDube used to sing the click song, Igqirha Lendlela. Igqirha Lendlela, uqongqothwane, igqirha lendlela uqongqothwane. And aqhubeka athi seleqabela gqithaba inkongqothwane, seleqabela gqithaba uqongqothwane. She used to sing this song efundisa eMelika ngama-click songs, efundisa ngolimi lwesiZulu, izilimi zethu zesinguni, efundisa abantu eMelika. And babeza in numbers. Wayengagcini ngokucula kuphela. We heard what else she was doing. She will give talks and they will raise funds, as we have heard. But it started with her talent, that of music that she used to benefit the people of South Africa. Umama uDube left a mark in education as an advocate of women education, in terms of community development, in terms of the arts, in terms of the media. Together with Umafuguzela, they raised a lot of money. I'm not going to repeat the money that they raised, which allowed them to build the school, and also other projects that they did together. So Umama Dube was one of those women who were written out of history books. Even on her death, her grave did not have her name. And once again, we really must thank Prof. Sheriff Keita, who came and he met the family and they were able to do a tombstone in remembering Umama uDube. So she was deliberately erased in history and our public imagination. She was not celebrated, even in the music fraternity. Having heard that she was a pianist, she played harp. So a challenge now for us is that, like, we do need to celebrate her in the music, in the music industry. We do have the music discipline in the School of Arts at UKZN. We need to celebrate the music for Umama uNokuthela Dube. Women are not celebrated in the same way as their male counterparts. Kodwa-ke Umama uNokuthela Dube contributed a lot to South Africa, especially to the organization, which is the African National Congress, working together with Umafuguzela. So there is a need to archive women's stories in South Africa. As we have seen, they have been erased. And that is why I would like to applaud the work of Prof. Khumalo and all the contributors to this book. I said, like, I must carry it because, like, I got my copy today. The work that culminated into this book is very, very crucial. Not only is the book talking about Umafuguzela, but it also talks about Umama uNokuthela, and it also talks about Umama uAngelina Dube. Ngelinye ilanga siyobe sihlangene la sithi sikhuluma ngoMafuguzela kodwa futhi siyobe sesimkhumbula nomama uAngelina Dube. Sengihlala phansi. In a 2022 documentary produced by 5 South African female, I've already said producers, Asanda Sizane, Ubusi Sizane, Florence Masebe, Umasaba Mangeni, Usiphokazi Johannes. This documentary, we screened it last year when we were having the Durban International Film Festival. So maybe many of you missed it, but this was a very, very important project of these 5 women. So we applaud their work. Not only have they produced the documentary, but they've also written a book. Kabazela did mention the book that they have written. And right now, the book is in the 4th reprint. That is how much the people have interest in the life of Umama uNokuthela Dube. So before I sit, Kabazela, siyabonga kakhulu for leading the College of Humanities
and also for constituting a task team that is going to reimagine history at UKZN. Umama Unoktela Dube will be one of those key figures that we will be writing in history to correct the erasure, which was done for 406 years. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Who is in the UN? Yeah, let's go ahead.
Hello, do you hear me? Hello? Hello, do you hear me? Can you please confirm that you hear me? Yes? But I can't hear you, that's the problem. I am not hearing anything from your side. Okay, now I can hear you, yes. So do you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Zondi, for your inspiring speech that tells us that we have no choice but to organize in order to continue the important mission started by Dr. John Langalibalele Dube and Nokutela Mdima Dube. Are you hearing me? Yes? Okay, good. Okay, all right. Okay. You have also mentioned many other names that we should be celebrating in the coming years. Thank you for your commitment and passion, because I love people who are passionate. So let's work together. Let's join our forces. Thank you also to Professor Hlongwa for your eloquent response. I am deeply moved by your words. On September 9th, 2004, I received the following email from Durban. Dear Professor Keita, I'm emailing on behalf of sculptor Andreas Botha. Andreas Botha works from Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and as a sculptor, lecturer at the Durban Institute of Technology, formerly called Natal Technikon, and cultural activist, he has been active in the creative fields for 30 years. He has been awarded the commission to produce 5 life-size bronze figures of leaders of the ANC for an ANC memorial, which will be situated at the Dube School chapel site at Otlange in Inanda. At this time, he's producing his rendition of Dr. Dube, who will be seated in front of his house at that site. We have received information of your interest in Dr. Dube and your writings on him, and would wish to request that you perhaps consider assisting Andreas with any visuals of the late Dr. Dube you may have. Andreas is committed to giving an honest and truthful as possible, a rendition of Dube, and any visual references to the man would be of great assistance. Would you have any pictures of Dr. Dube which you would be willing to email to us to assist Andreas in his work? We would very much appreciate this. We look forward to hearing from you. Yours faithfully, Janine Zegel. My collaboration with this gifted sculptor and my small contribution of visual material are what translated into the beautiful statue of Dr. John Langalibalele Dube that you find in front of the J.L. Dube Interpretive Center at Otlange today. And 1 year later, on September 2nd, 2005, I received this letter from Minister of Arts and Culture, Mr. Paulo Jordan. Dear Sheikh Keita, your letter dated 21st of March 2005 to President Becky has been referred to me for attention. The life and works of John Langalibalele Dube continue to be an inspiration to the people of South Africa and to the movement he led. We cannot find the words to express our profound appreciation of your film that constitute the first celluloid record of Dr. Dube's achievements. The special mention it received at Ouagadougou at the Pan-African Film Festival was indeed well-deserved. Unfortunately, until this time, no Black South African has made such a documentary. That fact deepens our indebtedness to you for having taken the plunge. We would be extremely obliged if the documentary was available for South African audiences to view. In that regard, I would be most appreciative of indications of where to obtain the film for our public broadcaster. It is among our plans to memorialize Dube, Otlange, and the newspaper he founded, Ilanga Lasse Natal, as part of a broader project to establish heritage roots in his home province. We would, of course, welcome your participation on this occasion. Oberlin Inanda, the life and times of John L. Dube, would play an important role at such an event. I shall be in touch with you in due course when there are further developments on this matter. Yours sincerely, Z. Paulo Jordan, Minister. I read these two letters as a way to provide a few answers to questions which people who do not know me may be asking themselves. Why is it a person born on the banks of the river Niger in Mali and who resides in the United States who should be speaking about John Dube and about Nokutela Mdima Dube on such an important occasion? The easiest answer I usually find is, I am African, I am an African. And for that reason, I should be doing this. To tell the truth, I continue to ask myself the question, the same question. When I landed in South Africa for the first time in January 1999 with a group of my American students and arrived in Inanda with my brother Langa Dube as our guide to such a great place of memory, I was far from suspecting that I was no farther from the Dube story than 100 meters because of a gravesite behind my house in Northfield, Minnesota. Two of those graves that I mentioned that were behind my house in Minnesota hold a great importance in the writing of the history of colonial South Africa in this post-apartheid context of today. They are the graves of the adoptive American grandparents of John L. Dube and the mentors and comrades in arms of both John and Nokutela for decades. Reverend William Cullen Wilcox and his wife, Ida Bell Wilcox, who taught Nokutela at Inanda Seminary. She was from my town here in Minnesota. Her parents are buried in a house that I lived in for more than 10 years. Her parents are buried, not even 100 meters behind my window. That discovery is what made me realize that I was called upon by our African ancestors to play a significant role in reconnecting South Africa to the full story of its liberation pioneers. A story of those who traveled the world, crossed the seas before most Black South Africans to gather the tools needed to fight oppression, while standing, as Professor Zondi eloquently said, on shifting sands. So here we are in September 2023, in the 150th year of Nokutela Mdima, a woman about whom very few people knew anything until 2011, when I traveled from the US to discover an unmarked grave at the Brixton Cemetery in Johannesburg with the diligent and determined assistance and help of the Johannesburg Parks and Cemeteries Department. Since then, Nkutela has been journeying back into our collective consciousness, into the imagination of South Africa and the world, as this intrepid and fearless woman who gave voice to her people and to the entire continent in both words and songs. Today, my job is to launch an appeal for a statue of Nkutela to be made and placed at Otlange. For me, this will make Nkutela even more present for the present and for the future. Such an act will help bring into the most glorious light a unique African story of triumph over the forces of darkness in times when things were not black and white, but very gray. Before closing, I just wanted to clarify one detail about the work of John and Nkutela. Otlange is not the first school that they started. Otlange is not the first school that they started. The first school that they started was in a small place called Muadi in 1894, right after their marriage. A school that they built without any fundraising outside. They built it with their own little money and with the money of Nkutela's brother, a man who has not been celebrated enough and about whom I'd like to hear more in the future. His name was John Simon Dima. Without this man, John and Nkutela's work would not have traveled the time to be with us today. John Simon Dima, I want you to remember this name. He was an educator, he was a visionary, and he was a philanthropist. He put his own money behind this young couple who did not have much money. And he put his own time. When John and Nkutela built the school in 1894 and left in 1896 to come to study in the US together, they left the school in the diligent care of John Simon Dima, who sacrificed himself for that school. And the school is still there today. I am organizing a visit by Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to visit the school because the school stands on a hill that is just above her hometown in KwaZulu-Natal. That school is very important. So when you go visit that small town, I really encourage a trip to be organized, a group trip to be organized, to take the young learners of Otlange and other places, to take them to the school, to see the school. It's still there. An elementary school, a modern elementary school is built next to it, but the vestiges are still there and the school needs to be renovated. My wish is that this school be celebrated more as the symbol of this young couple's commitment to each other, not only to each other, but to the welfare of the colonized and downtrodden African people. Let me finish by reading the earliest version of Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. In fact, something that should be clarified about that song too, which I'm working on presently at the invitation of the family. During my last trip, I was invited by the Mkibisa family, which is the family of the wife of Enoch Sontonga, Diana Mkibisa, who in fact was the true composer of Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. It was not Enoch Sontonga, it was Diana Mkibisa, who was the musician. Just like in the case of John and Nkutela, John was not a musician, Nkutela was the musician. So we need to also to set things straight about the origin of Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. It was composed by a woman. The song said, it used to be called A Prayer for the Children at Otlange. That was the first title of the song when it was taken over by Nukutela to be made almost into the anthem of the school, because the school was not supported by any government money. So the school had to be creative to find ways to fund itself. And creating a choir was among those creative ways of gaining funds for the school. It said this: "Oh Lord, bless Africa. Let her horn rise. Hear her prayers and bless her." The chorus said, "Come, O Spirit, come, come, come. Come, O Spirit, come, come, come. Come, Holy Spirit, and bless us, your children. Oh Lord, help Mafukuzela. Let his hand rise. Hear his prayers and bless him. Oh Lord, bless the son of Dube as he goes to the whites. Even as he crosses the seas, we are praying for him." In this song, I hear Nukutela's voice. She has always placed herself behind her husband. She was really saying, literally, it was me and Mafukuzela who were doing this work together. But she chose to put the son of Dube ahead. And that's how the song started. And that's how the song became gradually the anthem of the struggle. And as Professor Longwa said, many countries in Southern Africa and East Africa chose this song as the anthem. Again, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, which we should be in the business of continuing today. I think Professor Zondi's speech is an invitation for us to think Pan-Africanism as the Dubes, as the Semes, imagined it. That's what we should be doing. So thank you to all of you for your contribution to this celebration. And may we continue to gather regularly and for many years to remember this tremendous Dube legacy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let me give him another one. Thank you very much, Professor Keita. Am I? Oh, okay. Okay. Luckily, I know what to do. Thank you very much. It's really a privilege to listen to you again. Professor Keita, as we've already listened to all our colleagues here, it's been a beautiful night. I want to just give 5 minutes of reflection, questions and comments. Briefly, very short, so that we can round things up together. I really do not want us to say it was a monologue. You were spoken to, just to honor the need. You'll give it to them, eh? You'll hand it over to them. Thank you. Any hands? Yeah, quickly. We've got one there. Okay, 2, 3. Just one from a lady. It will do justice to this whole thing. We only have 3 men who have raised their hands. Whilst they are talking, we hope for an inspiration for a lady to also say something. Thank you. Briefly, as brief as you can, straight to the point. Comment or question.
Thank you very much.
I know.
Mr. Ngumalo, employed by government as social worker and employed by God as a principal currently.
Yes.
Now, I used to belong to an organization which said, whose mantra was nothing about us. It's not time now for women to write their own stories. Because if women's stories are written by males.
Mm.
They are going to be written from that perspective.
Mm.
And in South Africa today, we are told that 51.1% of South Africans are female and 48.9% are males.
Mm.
So females far outweigh about 1.7 million extra women than men.
Mm.
But then I want to pose a challenge to the university. I'm not an academic, I'm just a school principal. Is it not time to immortalize Nokutela by conferring a doctorate degree upon her? I don't know what the requirements are,
Yeah.
but if we say she was John Dube's equal,
Mm.
I think posthumously,
Mm.
she needs to be given that recognition.
Okay.
Maybe the university needs to think about it.
Siyabonga Zwide, siyabonga kakhulu. Siyabonga kakhulu. Then there is Umbuyazi ngapha. He was the second one. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you so
Yes.
much. Mine is really more of the remark
Mm.
that God has really blessed us
Mm.
by having opportunities
Mm.
to give
Mm.
so much credit to that wonderful man.
Yes.
But I think for me here, it's also to thank Sazonde.
Mm.
I'm truly inspired that your work here and your address is absolutely inspiring. In fact, it should have gone inspiring.
Mm.
As the third generation of our Dube,
Mm.
we really have a duty
Yeah.
not only to take us to do that,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So with that, I just want to commend the university at large and the leadership of the university. And I want to say to the students, those scholars of here, together with the university, a wise man once said, dreams without goals are just dreams. And ultimately, they feel disappointed.
Wow.
On the road to achieving those dreams, we must apply discipline, but not just discipline. We must apply discipline because without commitment,
Yes.
never start.
Yes.
Without the
Wonderful.
Thank you to the university.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Then there was just one hand there. We're still waiting for one from a sister, an inspired sister here, you know. Otherwise, I'll be tempted to do an altar call. Thank you.
Abilities that we have as Black people. My question is, what can we, as the youth of today, 2023, deduce from the character of Nokutela Dube and her principles in order to shape a better future for ourselves and also to find a solution to the problems of today?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Professor Tlongwa, you need to come here. The questions are directed to the two of you, not to me. I'm happy to support. Nonda. Go ahead, Nonda. Can we have the mic to given to the panelists? Yes, yeah.
Are they enough? We're done.
Yeah, we are done. We're still hoping for one from a lady. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. Let's have a question.
That's most likely to be the most difficult one.
Yeah.
It will come this side.
Can we have a mic to her? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let me just say there is a stirring happening there's a provocation happening and all of that.
Mm.
For those of us with a pen, if we realize there's so much to pen down.
Yeah.
There's so many books
Yeah.
to come out of this.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a person who thinks those terms. I've seen 6 books that
Yeah.
must come out of
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
And I don't know, really, Bohile, it's your challenge because all these things we give them to you. There's so many books that must come out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, this question coming from that young man
Yes.
who's saying, for these young people, Oshang, so what?
Yeah.
What must they take out of this?
Yeah.
Practically,
Yeah.
what are the principles of the life of Mamdima
Yes.
and Mafuguzela
Mm.
that also apply to them now in rescuing the country from decline
Yeah.
and in building a country of their dream?
Yes. Mhm.
They're saying, what are those?
Yeah.
And that needs a bit of reflection to think about them. Some of them are easy to express, like the principle of nothing is actually done until you start doing it. The principle of ants, the idea that your size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's what you do. The
Definitely.
principle of gradual change, the fact that the ants eat a baobab tree
Mm.
for about 10 years before the baobab tree
Mm.
falls. Don't say nothing is happening.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Once people have woken up to their duty to society,
Mm.
don't say nothing is happening because you
Yeah.
don't see the baobab tree
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah.
But it also says you don't have to climb to the top
Yeah.
to make a difference.
Yeah.
You make a difference to the top.
Yeah.
You don't climb to the top and make a difference at the top. You make a difference that takes you to the top.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. There's so many. We can all sit down and look at it and say, what are the 50 principles that are demonstrated by these pioneers' lives that could practically apply to every young person who wants to make a difference in society. But the most important one of them is that until a person knows, they are unlikely to do anything.
Yeah.
An African proverb says, it is a snake you see that's a danger to you. Sorry, so it's a snake you don't see that's a danger to you.
Mm.
Obviously, because the one you see, you can walk around it,
Yeah.
you can avoid it. But the one you don't see, you step on it and it kills you.
Mm.
So what is going to kill this nation is what they don't see,
Mm.
is what young people don't see.
Mm.
It's the young people thinking all is okay,
Mm.
or young people thinking, oh, it's normal.
Mm.
It's young people thinking, oh, now it has become a joke. The fact that we don't have electricity for 6 hours in a day.
Mm.
It is just to accept mediocrity as normal that will kill the nation. Mediocrity will happen, it's a reality. It's not it that will kill us, but it's our ignorance of it, dude, especially when that ignorance is mixed with arrogance. You know, the most dangerous people who are arrogantly ignorant. So you laugh at it with great confidence. In Liberia, if I may say, just quickly,
Yeah.
after a terrible period of civil war, with Charles Taylor's rebels that had the tendency to chop people's limbs and chop people's arms. That was their form of thing. After all that period, over 20,000 young people have lost limbs and stuff like right through Liberia. Then it decides that he realized that democracy is coming. He then converts himself. He puts away the arms, he puts away the camouflage, he puts on a suit as good as the one of the Honorable Justice here. He looks very normal at that, trims himself, goes to work on his appearance and stuff, changes his voice to like Zoliban's voice and all of those things. And does all of this, all of that. And then he remakes himself. The people of Liberia who had suffered for such a long time are wooed by that. The monkey on top. to say a slogan that is painful to this day. They say, he killed my father, he raped my mother, but I will vote for him. That was the slogan the people said. Don't say it was terrible, because it can happen to us too. That a fool that is unable to manage his own personal affairs, that has not accomplished anything at a personal level, that has no career to demonstrate their ability, you and I can elect them. How different are we from them who say, he killed my father, he raped my mother? So one of the biggest challenges we have to fight against is the battle against forgetting. Yeah, no, let me just not say it further. But I commit myself to contribute to the project of doing books. I think when it's time, I think I commit Professor Hlonga on her behalf, democratically. We will find other people who will support you. Let's do these books. Let the first one be launched at the next lecture next year.
Wonderful.
I commit that one. Thanks.
Nondaba has already spoken for me, so I think because of time, I'm actually really mindful of time, but like maybe if I may pick on the suggestion from the principal that as UKZN, we honor Mama Unoktela Dube. I think that is something as the university we will have to take forward. I think we do have enough information to be able to submit to the committee, and I think we will get support to honor, to give Mama Unoktela Dube the honor that she deserves. So I think that is what I can say.
Thank you, Prof.
Just because of time. Thank you very much.
And the most important question and comment come from a zebra.
Yes. That's very important. About that one, I think in my legally response, I've already mentioned the work that has been started by our ladies, or Asanda, or Sipogazi joiners, and so forth. So there is still quite a lot, especially on storytelling, that still needs to take place. Unondaba has indicated that erasure that we have seen. It's because of some of the weaknesses in storytelling at the time. So it's time now for women to write their own stories, and those stories be published. We have seen the excellent work that Ongezwa has come to perform here. So Ongezwa will, she will be inspiring. Maybe she may lead the team that will come up with poems that will be written by women, about women. So Ongezwa, yes.
Thank you. Yes, let's have your question, a comment. Yes,
From Ohlanga High School. Mine is actually a comment based on yonke information esitholile namhlanje. Ngithole a lot about Mr. J.L. Dube no nkosikazi wakhe, of which sengifunda isikhathi eside Ohlanga le information bengayazi yonke. And I do think and I do wish this kind of information would be distributed ey'koleni, not only Magunama events njengalawa kodwa this information yaziwe like iy'kole zonke ngoba ngempela sayibona. And another comment would be on the women empowering. I'd also like to comment on that. I am also a woman, and I do think that the reason maybe why women are not really recognized in society or given the recognition that they deserve, I think it's because the stereotype that says women must be dominant and male must be masculine. I do think it is about time where males along with females work together to empower women, because a man is a man because of a woman. A mother gave birth to a man, therefore a man is made by a woman. So I do think women should be recognized.
Bravo.
Thank you, colleagues. Maybe just to, whilst Ubaba Dube is coming, to just say a few words quite briefly, but just to say maybe to also assure Uzwide Lapana Uti, we are going to work the schools that are involved to make sure that she is honored. And maybe to say to the young people who are saying, what do we take home from here? Actually, when Dube pushed to go to the US, he was just 16 years old. It came from a young person to build himself and open doors for himself. And so, yes, there's already something that you can do as young people, as an initiative to push the boundaries and open the envelope.
Angibonge mphathi wohlelo. Duma. Ngiswela amazwi ukubonga for wonke umuntu okhona kule lecture room. Maybe let me start by thanking Prof. Nondaba. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was quite a moving, and inspiring inputs. And as I was sitting there, Prof, and as Sheriff Keita, Professor Sheriff Keita, from Minnesota University, as he was giving that presentation, somehow something, just worked on me internal to say, when are we going to begin to see South Africans taking charge of their own history, preserving it and promoting it, and taking it to greater heights? But then on the other hand, I said, this could be the reason for the remnants, of the apartheid past, the segregation. I think there is that element of, and the impact that Bantu education created. Let me take this opportunity to greet everyone, all the professors that are in the house, our former judge who is Zebra Ilkulu, Ngolosi Siyabonga, Shongololo. Ngiyaza uhamba wedwa, kodwa uhamba nebele lakho. As umngani colleague, in the legal fraternity, Ngcobo omkhulu Mashiya Mahle, ngathi azoshumayela, siyabonga ukuba khona kwakho. Ngibingelela abafundi ikakhulukazi basohlanga. To all the learners, I'm saying particular to Mkhatshwa principal, I heard your comments, and again, I like your attitude. In fact, he's one of the young principals of Ohlanga, is a visionary, and we sometimes engage and say, you know what, we need to do something about these memorial lectures, because here it's more like we elders, we have a tendency of trying to convert the already converted, trying to disseminate information to people that has already had the information. But in fact, the people that actually are deserving the true beneficiaries of this information are these learners. And again, I want us to work on that. I'll be brief, but let me thank everyone. We as a family, we always get inspired in seeing particularly all the institutions of higher learning, taking charge of preserving and promoting the legacy of our grandfather, together with our grandmother, Ugogo Noktela. And I subscribe to the notion that says, behind every successful man, there's a woman behind. Indeed, there's a lot that Unoktela, Ugogo way to Noktela, together with Ugogo, the second wife, Umakumalu, that they did. Because can you imagine a period of 40 years after the passing in 1946 of our grandfather. But ugogo Makhumalo, you know, she took the baton and she carried for a period of 40 years before she passed on. So there's quite a lot. But again, maybe as a lesson for tonight, again, Prof, I stand to be corrected on this, to say, really, we need to do a bit of some, you know, introspection, you know, to say, where are the gaps? And then we need to try and work on those gaps, and then try and inculcate this culture from these young learners, particularly those that are doing matric and those that are post-matric, to say, particularly those that are interested in doing research work. We need to assist them, because there's a lot of work that is actually, that gets, you know, losing the surface, so that at the end, we know we create archives, you know, so that we, at the end of the day, we get proud of ourselves and learn and draw positive lessons, you know, from those that passed on, you know, drawing good lessons from Ogogo Noktela, Nabo Ogogo Umakhumalo. So with those words, I want to say, yes, we want to continue to support this initiative, to all the professors, to all the teachers, the educators and the learners from Ohlange. Let us grow the numbers, you know, to embrace this, so that there'll be this continuation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mbuyazi. We take this opportunity to, Nondaba, can I have you come forward? Yes. This is a token of appreciation from the institution. Oh, is it? Okay. Thank you so much.
I will declare.
Thank you so much.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Can I say, after what you said, because I apologize to speak after you've spoken. But what we were saying, that I was saying to myself, maybe working with the principal of Q,
Yeah.
maybe some of these young people have reflections they want to write.
Yeah.
It may just be a page.
Yeah.
It may be a couple of pages.
Yes.
Why don't you assemble them
Yes.
into some sort of a book? Because that is what will live through history.
Wonderful.
Part of the challenge with Mam Tima's issue is that she has probably said a lot, but her stories were not captured. Her voice was not captured. These ones can redeem it. Maybe some of these want to volunteer, being assisted to write what they think about what they had and read about JL and Mam Tim.
No, thank you.
What about that? Is that possible?
Wonderful. Great idea.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? Yeah, we can do it together. We'll coach them. Let's
Thank
do it.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. This is wonderful. So it's supposed to comment, just a request. We can give you just one opportunity, quick one. Yeah, just to comment. And then we'll be able to move on. Thank you. This is the last comment, and then we'll, yeah, no problem. Yes, yeah.
No, I actually want to say we like this idea which is good.
Yes, yeah.
And I also saw,
Yeah.
you know, like saying the idea was created long time ago.
Yeah.
So what I would love to find out are timelines. I'm a bureaucrat as well. These ideas that are really articulated here with no timelines, unfortunately, please, as you really advocate for this idea, let's get some timelines so that we get this going.
Okay.
And this idea as well for the students, it is also critical. I'm just saying another way to immobilize Nokutela will be when we elevate, you know, her work in a curriculum, in a school curriculum, you know, and I think I know that we have academics here who could actually set up, you know, a curriculum so that we know exactly what is happening.
And I know there's a School of Arts here. I'm just giving an assignment here that, why can't we develop a series or a musical, with the KZNPO of Nokutela's work, so there is a lot that we could do as I heard. Thank you very much.
Teachers and the kids must give us the list of those who are willing to do as soon as next week. I'm ready to work tomorrow.
Okay, wow.
If we get a list, we can work with them tomorrow.
Wow.
So it's up to them.
Thank you very much. We can then, it's the tradition of this lecture that we then sing the national anthem and then close. But before that, just to thank everyone who came, to thank the team. Can they actually stand, those who are here, who are part of the organizing team? We only Swa has left because she's got a child to take care of. But can I ask Umgad lapha phezulu uthasukume uMasondo udingiswayo ngapha uPhukabazela yes uKhabazela laphaya and no Prof Mulesane. She says she can't stand because it doesn't actually make any difference whether she's standing or sitting down. But yeah, this is the team, colleagues, that has been holding this thing together. Thank you very much. And we are wanting to open up the team. We need to make the circle bigger if we're going to take it forward to the future. It's been comfortable to be this cozy, small group that we are, but we are only going to make this work to the future if we open up and have all the interested stakeholders to be part of this. Non-double, you are co-opted already. You are now part of the team. Yeah, and then also Uzwite Lapana, we need that because we need someone who's closer to the students and all that to continue the influence from there. Yes, yeah. And then the Dube Foundation, it needs somebody to come, I'm taking a risk. I've not been mandated by the committee, but I tend to be right in what I try and do, even without permission. So I think this is right. And we do. So let's sing the national anthem so that we can be able to go. But otherwise, thank you very much, even to our virtual participants and everyone, Professor Keita, everyone who's been part of this. This is wonderful. May it be that you have a good night. And Kosisigeleli Africa, those who are not vocally challenged may start. Can I ask the DVC and the Dube family and just Danny to come forward? They are asking for a photo. Yeah, we usually do that. You come, guys. Yeah, we come this side. We come this side. What do you want a photo?
challenge. Very good.
No, it was great and wonderful. Yeah. Good, wonderful, man.